XVIII Cátedra Raúl Prebisch aquí en la CEPAL. Contamos con la presencia del señor José Manuel Salazar Sirinax, secretario ejecutivo de la Comisión
Executive Secretary of
ECLAC
ECLAC,
de las Naciones Unidas, la CEPAL, quien está
and
acompañado
he is accompanied by our speaker, Mr. Jon Azúa, President and Founder of the new ECLAC, and today he will give the 18th Raúl Prebisch Lecture, that is to characterize a strategy for competitive welfare, prosperity, and inclusive development. And now the ones who are participating here through the virtual platforms, we welcome you all, especially authorities. We also greet ambassadors and members of ECLAC, of the United Nations, and representatives of the diplomatic corps, colleagues of the United Nations systems, colleagues of ECLAC, ladies and gentlemen. To begin with this activity, we're going to listen from the Executive Secretary, Mr. José Manuel Salazar Sirinac, Executive Secretary of ECLAC. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear guests, people in present as well as virtually connected, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor for me to welcome you to this 18th Raúl Prebisch Lecture. This is a lecture is a tribute to the memory of Raúl Prebisch, one of the most influential thinkers in our history, but it's also a platform for critical analysis to think about the future and to enrich our thinking with new ideas that will allow us to contribute to the regional conversation on how to move towards a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable development. In the fulfillment of both objectives, the presence today of my great friend, Mr. Jon Azúa, couldn't be more appropriate and an occasion to celebrate. Thank you so much, Jon, for accepting our invitation. It's an honor to have you here giving 2024 Prebisch Lecture. In a few minutes, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, and also to do this in a better way and to put the presence of Mr. Jon Azúa and here and ECLAC on the perspective and with a message for Latin America and the Caribbean, I will allow myself to provide you with a few words of context. Raúl Prebisch, with his keen understanding of global dynamics and his ability to challenge conventions, left us a legacy that remains more valid and important than ever. The need to think and rethink our region from our own reality, from our own needs, but with an eye on the world economy and above all, and I would like to underscore here, with some attitude, with some predisposition that is promoting economic and social development. This is not a utopia, and nor should it be thought from utopian position, but it's something that is not only desirable, but possible if societies join collective efforts and they work hard on that direction.
Prebisch placed productive development and technical progress at the center of his thinking on economic development and his policy recommendations. He also always maintained a strong concern for social development, income distribution, and equity, but pointed out that redistributive policies without productive development and productivity policies are not conducive to a real and progressive transformation of economies. In his view, economic development policies require a deliberate effort of public policies and all relevant stakeholders to accelerate economic growth and change the pattern of economic and social development simultaneously. And I would affirm that it is because of this framing of the challenges of development that Dr. Prebisch gave to ECLAC from the beginning that in spite of the semantic changes over time, the theme of productive transformation with equity has been a constant in ECLAC's thinking. In keeping with this tradition of ECLAC thinking, which has always viewed structural change and productive development, that is, diversification of production, technological sophistication, and the creation of quality jobs as central development challenges, since I arrived at ECLAC, I have been concerned and engaged in taking up these issues once again. It is no coincidence that our basic diagnosis is the countries of the region mirrored in three mutually reinforcing development traps, one of low capacity for growth, high inequality, low social mobility, and weak social cohesion, and a third of low institutional capacities and ineffective governance. I have developed a vision that sets as its horizon the achievement of a more productive, inclusive, and sustainable development, and as priority areas for action, 11 major transformations required by the countries of the region, one of which is a major productive transformation. In addition, we are placing great emphasis on answering the question of how to manage this major transformation, including the major productive transformation by taking or grounding the answers in a pragmatic way in the areas of governance, top capabilities of institutions, the necessary spaces for social dialogue, and the political economy of the transformation.
Reciente documento para el periodo de sesiones en Lima,
We
Perú,
have written
titulado
this vision
frente a América Latina y el Caribe, ante las trampas
We
del
have
desarrollo.
written this vision in a comprehensive manner. We have a document, Latin America and the Caribbean facing development traps, indispensable transformations, and how to manage them. We want to put into perspective and better introduce our distinguished speaker of today. Jon Azúa is a man of thought and action, or perhaps it is more accurate to say of thoughtful, adaptive, and intelligent action, based on a powerful combination, a clear vision of the future complemented by a continuous and deep reflection on how to move towards that desired future. This is how Jon Azúa successfully led major transformations in the autonomous community of the Basque Country from the late 80s until the end of his time in public service, although I should add that even after he left high-level public office, he has not ceased to have an enormous influence in his beloved autonomous community and beyond. Already in the 80s, he played an important role in the public policy agendas of the autonomous community of the Basque Country, where he was Director of Planning and Economic Management of the Department of Transport, Communications and Maritime Affairs between 1980 and 82. He then became Deputy for the Promotion and Economic Development of Vizcaya from 1983 to 1985, member of the Basque Parliament between 86 and 88, and Councillor Secretary of the Presidency between 87 and 88. From these positions, he promoted important reforms aimed at economic modernization and sustainable development. However, his period of great transformational influence was from 1991, when he held the position of Vice President or Vice Legenda Cari and Minister of Industry and Energy of the Basque government until 95. During that period, Jon was the driver and leader of the great productive transformation of the autonomous community of the Basque Country, based on the industrial and cluster development policy. In other words, Jon is the father of the cluster policy of the Basque Country, which is one of the most successful experiences of productive transformation in Spain and Europe. To illustrate, allow me to say that in 2017, the autonomous community of the Basque Country was ranked as the sixth most competitive region in the European Union. But his career has not only been institutional in terms of public policy, he has also had important academic and business careers. In the academia, he was promoter, founder, and chairman of the advisory board of the Basque Institute of Competitiveness Orchestra, director of the Basque Chair of Competitiveness at SABES in Shanghai. He has been professor and researcher of the MOC network of the Institute for Strategy and Competitiveness at Harvard University and the Basque Institute of Competitiveness Orchestra. He has published influential books and numerous articles. The titles of his three best-known books are Cooperative Alliances for the New Economy, Clustering and Localizing the Economy, The Magic of the Process, and Vizcaya 2050. On the business side, he is currently advisor to the chairman and board member of the Keralty Group, a healthcare business group with presence in several countries, and is chairman and founder of Enovating Lab, a platform dedicated to innovation and the transformation of economic, social, and business models. Mr. Azúa was also vice chairman of the Sanitas International Organization from 2015 to 2018, director and CEO of the Bilbao Stock Exchange and Bilbao Plaza Financiera. He has been advisor to several international companies and institutions, including the World Economic Forum, the European Union, Caja de Ahorro Vizcaína, and many others. He is also currently a member of the governing body of several non-profit organizations, Enovask, the Basque Innovation Agency, and Tecnalia. As a personal anecdote, I want to share with you that I met Jon Azúa during 4 visits I made to the autonomous community of the Basque Country starting in 2015. In the process of researching the industrial innovation and cluster policy of that community, research that resulted in a small book entitled Cluster and Productive Development Policies in the Autonomous Community of the Basque Country, Lessons for Latin America and the Caribbean, which I prepared while I was regional director of the ILO. And I must confess that Jon Azúa has been a great influence on my ideas about the importance of productive development and cluster policies. In view of the importance of productive development policies for the great productive transformation required by Latin America countries to escape not only from the trap of low capacity to grow and transform, but also from the trap of high inequality and low social mobility. And in view of Mr. Jon Azúa's experience on the what, the how, and the whys of PDPs, the enormous relevance of today's conference for the region and for ECLAC's work is more than evident. Dear Jon, it is a true honor to have you here today to deliver this prestigious lecture and to join the group of figures of enormous intellectual stature who have joined us in this space. Persons like Celso Furtado, Joseph Stiglitz, Fernando Enrique Cardoso, Rubens Recupero, Dani Rodríguez, Enrique Iglesias, Tulio Halperin, Fernando Sabater, Aldo Ferrer, José Antonio Campos, Danilo Astori, Luis Gonzaga de Melo, Rolando Cordera, Mariana Mazzucato, Ricardo French David, Ha Jun Chang, and Rebecca Greenspan. Thank you very much, and the stage is yours.
Les recordamos a los participantes
We
que al
remind the
finalizar la
participants
cátedra,
that at the end of the
señor
lecture,
Azúa va
Mr.
a
Azúa
responder
will
gentilmente preguntas
kindly
de los
answer
participantes.
questions
Entonces
from
les
the
pedimos
participants.
escanear el
So
código
we ask you
QR
to scan the
para
QR
poder hacer.
code to
Muchas
be able
gracias.
to ask your questions, please.
Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, José Manuel. I must say that it is a true privilege and an enormous responsibility to be here together with you in this very special forum, recognition and homage not only to Professor Prebisch, but also to all those who throughout these years have worked towards the development of Latin America in the different processes and times with different lines of thought and attitude of first order. I was discussing with Jose Manuel when I had the privilege to be invited to this lecture today. We discussed about how sad I was. Well, what am I going to be able to contribute with after everything that has been done throughout these years and with all the reflection you've been doing and that we can see through your publications, your reflections, the contributions that take place at such a crucial moment for the world and of course for Latin America and the Caribbean. I will try today as modestly and humbly as possible to transmit some reflections of something that, as Jose Manuel has said, is not essentially a first academic work or a PhD thesis or a process to do just a reflection, but I would like us to think on how and what is absolutely necessary in order to have a transformation, to produce a transformation, and to overcome the big gaps in Latin America and the Caribbean, and ask ourselves how we can approach and with what attitude this economic and social transformation required by our countries and the world. From that point of view, I have prepared a document, a conference that will be available to you completely for you to be able to follow this topic. And I will, in this case, use a short presentation that I hope will facilitate the understanding of this, which is very complex, which is a process which never ends for the economic, prosperous development of our countries, but that needs a framework which is the one I would try to transmit and, if possible, build in a shared way with all of you. From this position, it is important in the first place, and let us see if I can make this work. In the first place, I would like to apologize for the very long title of this presentation. I have said this is very complex, but I think it's much simpler than what it seems, even if we can get lost through a series of elements. I have entitled this talk Characterizing a Productive, Competitive, Prosperous, Inclusive, and Sustainable Economy. Nothing more and nothing less. These are the elements that we need to understand, each one of us, in their true dimension, in their true content, to be able to adjust. Not only that, clusterizing is not the main objective, clusterizing an economy. Clusterizing an economy, in my opinion, is an instrument to serve a purpose. And the purpose is to give ourselves a true strategy of competitiveness, of well-being, of prosperity, of richness, even shared by co-creating social companies, putting persons in the center of our process and our work. We permanently speak about productive economy, and this leads us to two fundamental aspects that we need to take into account. First, the reductionism that for a long time has been applied to the productive economy in terms or as synonymous manufacturing. This is much more than manufacturing. It is much more than an industrial policy. And for the peace of mind of many, today we can speak about the rebirth of new industrial policies, which allows us, to those who went against the industry and the industrial policy, to come to a new industrial policy that we will be able to invent together. We can use different adjectives. We can speak about a complete value chain. We can transcend from the manufacturing areas. We can transcend a top-down policy from the government planning and trying to avoid market distortions and think about new concepts that truly put the stress on the numerator, all that generates value, new value, adds value to the economy by breaking the classic statistics of the three primary sectors and tertiary sectors, and also breaking that supposed magic that made so many fall in love, trying to classify countries according to their options for services or industry in terms of all the progressism, all the future aspiration was to do services and bet for industry and manufacturing for factories was like moving to the past or going back to a lower stage of development.
Today's economic productivity and tomorrow's economic productivity, which has been highly affected by the exponential technologies and the domain of the same, the capacity for innovation, the capacity to create value change, global change, compels us to revisit competitiveness. Competitiveness, which, like the cluster concept, has resulted in a word that has been hated in many places for relating this to some specific school or some specific association. Competitiveness, a bad translation from English, has taken many people to think of competitiveness policies as exclusive from cooperation and collaboration, and above all, policies which exclude social policies, as we'll see in this presentation, are essential to realize them at the same time that economic policies and not after them. And so how can we distribute them? But from the very beginning, when we design a strategy to share more, we need that this productive economy, which has influence on competitiveness, lead us to what for? To get some prosperous societies with welfare, and even under a broad concept that we will see throughout this presentation, that is, to name it in a way that is important, I call it this cooperation for value, beyond the comparative value, beyond equity, beyond inclusion, beyond the distribution of richness, distribution among everyone, all people involved, all the regions, all societies and communities which make this possible. And sustainable, that means beyond the eco-economies, beyond sustainability, saving the planet at the same time. And so we can reach competitiveness and wealth, but at the same time, this is financially viable in the long term and endurable. All this has taken us to make reflections and to wonder what I'm suggesting here as a subtitle. Okay, how can we do all this? What should we do to get all this? And Jose Manuel also mentioned about what this thought from ECLAC has done, and in terms of Latin American policies throughout many years. I'm not going to stop here, but I would like to wonder myself about some elements which are part of the diagnosis that had been made from ECLAC, that has been published in terms of the existing gaps, which are hampering that development, which made a new decade possible for Latin America. And we have a lot of questions. We could wonder what are
Podemos preguntarnos
we
cuáles
can
son
wonder what are all the critical elements behind those gaps. We're living some moments where we can question and this globalization process, which have brought about a lot of advantages, but have created great distortion for different countries, where we realize that the world was not so global as we thought, and what is local also matters. And so this has been expressed after the pandemic that we went through, which is still having impact that we don't know what is going to be an end out of that with the problem not providing a proper response to the pandemic. And so many countries of Latin America has found separation, isolation of some regions. So in many cases, there's an absolute absence of integration, state inclusiveness for the development of different populations which are out of the global development of the country. An important concern is about funding and taxing, and with the possibility where we should have the economy between the different territories, but they don't have the means of the necessary sources to approach long-term policies and strategies which are funded in the different areas and regions. We have important problems including different elements which have been gathered in this paper, which made us to wonder beyond the diagnosis, to wonder where are the hows and the response to each of these elements. Because as Jose Manuel said, what's important here also is to wonder why and what for. There is a first sentence here that I would like that you could keep this in your minds. The first essential requirement to approach any process of this nature, to take ownership about our future. Each of us, each region, every country, every individual which has some leadership to transform its own society has to make the effort and need to have the will to take their own to take ownership on their future. The idea is to have a determined future and to make anything that is possible to make this future into a reality. That will get us closer to revive response and to the strategies which must be unique. And this is what each of us, the one who are here in this room, we have to try to make. And this, of course, needs to be hand in hand with the shared leadership. It's not individual leaderships, because it's very easy to talk about this, but it's not so easy, and it's not so easy to maintain, because a leadership should take risk and should be trustworthy, and with a permanent commitment and with the necessary information to make the rest of the people who are participated in this are able to support, to participate, and to improve also. Transformative leadership of a reality that we don't like, and a very important sentence that we should bear in mind is this one. I like my country, I love my country, but I'm not in agreement in the way how my country is today. I want something more for my country. I want something more for Latin America. I want something more for my region. And I want to take this to another transformation, no matter the partial success that we may have had. And by knowing why at the service of the community and people, starting from why is there when we are, we will know how we will give us the appropriate framework to do this. If we have a framework, no matter how complex this framework may be, we have a guiding element which help us to get rid of what is useless and to go for that is desirable. And this framework is the greatest facilitator that will take us to get the final results that, on the other hand, should be supported by elements and instruments which are transformative in nature. So that's why to have a productive economy, as the one has been suggested here, I say this from a real experience, and hence the concept of economic clusterization. For me, clusterization is more than a natural thing, but to put economy and territory together is to facilitate development, instrumentalization, institutionalization of human, social, institutional capitals which are necessary for the development of a country, and perform accordingly. We have to go beyond the diagnosis, beyond the analysis and the theories, no matter how good they have been done, but this will need to take us to get a real
estaremos en condiciones de ver más o menos bien. Ese marco que estoy
this framework here that you can see on the screen, it's a complex map. I have called this the need to revisit our competitiveness and development model. Competitiveness and development model, which a starting point is calling upon to try to overcome or mitigate inequality, the inequality that we are all living, inequality that we're living in the world, inequality which is a danger not only for livelihoods, but for democracies, for any project, for any dream or aspiration that we may have. But this inequality is not, we cannot overcome this inequality just by growing, but we have to do it with inclusiveness. We have to co-create this world. We have to share that value, and we need to include this together with an umbrella of social welfare for the society as a whole, joining efforts, commitments for transformation. It is always difficult and subject to changes and innovations that requires to go from today to tomorrow. No matter the way, we need strategies, comprehensive strategies at the service of individuals, and this requires an enormous effort in economic terms, an extraordinary effort in terms of health, education, housing, justice, but beyond equity and solution to each of these essential areas to get full development, we need to think on the other way that is that provide us with the great opportunities to create wellness and economic and productive economic activity, and so and to go beyond the transformation of our society. We need to be aware that the labor world and is experiencing transformation and with great doubts, and this compels us to include as part of this economic and social concept, looking for some elements which I have called here by way of reference, some universal income. We cannot make an economic transformation without offering the society, the individuals, to enter into this process without having a safe environment for today, but also after when they are retired from the labor market. And so that requires to enter into a deep transformation according to this economic strategy. Productive economy, well, this is also detailed in the document, the paper that you will have at hand. Well, we have here technological innovation, discipline, negotiation, collective bargaining, and also we have the concept of being rooted to the territory and a productive economy for the benefit of individuals which are participating in all this. But the transformation of the productive economy will require, above all, different important conditions.
First, it forces us to deconstruct and revisit the different essential elements of that competitivity, prosperity, and development, focusing on productive economy to generate that nucleus that will foster development and will make this work. Understand the space in terms of opportunities. We have so much data regarding problems. If we see them as problems, we will be stuck and it will be impossible to solve them. But if data, the problems, we see them as a source of opportunity, then we will have a guide, unique guide that will help us find the solutions we need. How to solve them is a big strength, the big source that inspires us and tells us what is it that we need to overcome those problems. To generate shared value dynamics, I will always insist on that, and do what is possible, everything possible. It's not enough to have a diagnosis, to state, to say. We have to make things possible, which forces us to transformations. We have to deepen in the benefits that are distinctive of that productive economy. And basically, we have to think about being born again, a new birth for industrial new policies, and also take care of human capital, social and institutional capital. And all of this, of course, cannot be a leap into the void, nor can we think about a dream that cannot be realized outside of a world context. We know, whether we want it or not, that a series of mega trends will come. This funnel that I show here tries to reflect and represent the totality of elements that, whether we want it or not, will have in front of us if we don't have them already. We have a very long task ahead of us, but all that will happen, we have to be able to do an additional effort or exercise. We need to understand to what extent this will have an impact upon us directly in our own strategy. To what extent? Because it won't affect all in the same way. There will be a mantle that will cover us all, but everyone has different problems and opportunities depending on the starting point and the capacity to create new elements and developing a way to respond. Thus, we move downwards towards the why, the what for. For what do we do all this? We understand all these mega trends, and we need to try to solve what we believe should be our commitment. And this will lead us to what? Whichever the ones that will really have an impact upon us, we won't be able to avoid what I call to transform unique models, something possible and something that responds to observable capacities. This is a picture where we see so many factors that will have an impact. The companies need to change their models. They need to bring their answers, and they need to create new roles. The governments need to reformulate themselves. They need to change their structure, adapting it to the strategies and challenges it has. We cannot look for strategies and objectives, different ones, with the same administrative structures that we've been having for 2 or 3 centuries. We can not only change the names of the ministries and departments, we need to change their objective, their purpose, their capacity of response, the requalification, the reorientation of the persons that work in them. Same thing happens in the companies. For companies, it's not enough to pay taxes and generating employment and generating wealth. They have to provide answers to social demands, to the end communities in which they work. As the company becomes more international, it acquires new responsibilities in multiple communities, in all the countries and regions where it works, in all the commitments with the different countries or governments which it has to live with, and so on and so forth. Today, we live an enormous current towards the new movement, the new economic thought, the new social thought, the new recomposition of the relationships between the agents to be able to respond to the enormous challenges ahead of us, towards a new map of competitiveness, navigating with new factors and essential elements. You have it in the document. Here I have included only 21 different points that are critical, that responded to a series of elements that we considered essential at a point in time and that configured different policies and that today are being reviewed and are in new conditions to approach them, and which are a guideline of the many changes we have to carry out. Impossible task, difficult task to achieve? No. Before I meant Jose Manuel spoke about a publication of competitive alliances for the new economy. If we start on the right of the slide, we can simplify very simply, we can simplify these changes that have common characteristics. Things are happening very fast. It's no one on his or her own can solve problems. A convergence of disciplines, of knowledge, of information, of collaboration, and of competencies are a must. And it forces us to look for new strategic spaces, new areas of opportunity, new elements, and what I call here Revolution 4.0, not to call it 10.0, maximal. Big problems of exponential technologies, social changes, processes and revolutions that we need in order to change things and that are exponential and that require exponential solutions. And this speed is what we could call a new economy or the same economy of always adapting to the real problems we have every day and that we need to face. But in order to follow that path, the first thing we need is a convergence of companies, of governments, of communities, and of all the agents that make possible the final result. And this forces us to go to the other end. It forces us to go to the need of learning to live by generating alliances, participating with others, generating networks of networks, public-private associations, public, private associations, and it leads us to an essential element, which is what I hope, competitivity. Competitivity, because we always speak about collaborating. It seems natural and very easy, but it is very difficult. We all know that. To collaborate with a neighbor, with ourselves, with the couple, with the company, with the government, with other type of agents and other countries is much more difficult than what we believe. We maintain our positions, we need to generate trust, we need to have the necessary tools, shareable goals, and shareable benefits. And at the same time, we must not give up our strategies, which are unique and make a difference. We have to live, I use the term, the schizophrenia of collaborating and competing at the same time, and generally with the same people, with the same companies, with the same governments, with the same people with which we collaborate. We also compete to make possible our model, and that always oriented towards the complete commitments of well-being. So when we ask ourselves, well, and we're going to clusterize the economy, that is, we do not need to put a cluster in our lives. No one has asked us to put a cluster in our lives, and it's not the big Pandora box. We clusterize the whole economy, not a cluster to teach, a success area, but the whole economy in a certain territory, because this duality with all the public-private agents working in a certain direction tries to maintain three strategies within that clusterized organization. One strategy is the single strategy of each of the agents forming that clusterization. Each one continues with their own strategies and objectives, their own competencies and their own collaboration in terms of uniqueness and definition of concrete objectives. A second strategy which is shared, which is the cluster strategy, that which allows to potentiate the development and the individual strategy that we all have in every joint action. And then the country strategy, the region strategy, which has to be completely aligned with the cluster that has been determined and with the companies and agents that form a part of it. This is the true reason or the true explanation, the reason why of that work that clusterization allows. It facilitates dialogues, trust between different agents, facilitates the search of shareable goals, the understanding of what happens in a region or a country. It facilitates the capacity of governments to invite beyond their programs and policies to promote agreements and enables joint advancement. This is when we wonder, Why and what for should we clusterize? And this is where we have many elements that clusterization implies by definition. And we are normally facing new rules of the game. The different industries are mutating their own rules of the game. They have mutated the rules that they had been using for long years. They dissolve or break their frontiers. The car, the automobile, someone not only thinks about what we cannot think about traditional automobiles, but we need clean technologies, we need clean energy, we need technological innovation. Those exponential technologies we have mentioned has to move towards how to use or sell their own products and services through new instruments and new transportation means. All that needs to be done. And we need to connect with the avant-garde of knowledge, whatever it is, in any place in the world, to be able to offer to our territories a future of prosperity, of well-being. We need to guarantee to our people the possibility of connecting with the avant-garde of knowledge from our homes. And it is to connect with the foremost of knowledge and be co-protagonist of that change. We need to assume and run risks. The road is long, the process enormous. We can establish an arrival point, but we mustn't deviate through our own changes or the changes implemented by others. We need to learn how to share alliances and partnerships, and we need to give them structures. It's not a matter of informal meetings where it seems that we all agree and we share, I don't know, a paper, but we need transparency, a shared project, shared resources, expectable results that can be shared. We need to generate networks of spaces that respond to what we want to do. We need a differentiated future for our societies, and we need tools for governance and for institutionalization, and all this has to be supported by commitments. Commitments are easy to state, but we must also we must always begin by assuming them. And by producing clusterization, we can produce a pre-existing clusters. There are associations, there are groups in any territory, a little, a lot, to whatever degree, but we can not do only what we are already doing, but based on that, we have to build those capacities and strengths that we do not have and strengthen towards the innovation that we expect.
And all these requires the commitment between the private and public sector, but it doesn't mean that two areas have to do the same. Each one has its own role and responsibility in terms of this competitive and clusterization. The real commitment is in co-creating value at the service of the society. And that has a first cycle. That's what we could call the entrepreneurial cycle, which the first thing that the companies need to think is to rethink of their own activities, how they are doing, where they have to do it, and what to do. And then to rethink on their role in the different segments of the constellation of value chain, where they are moving. And if there is only one change or multiple changes around the world, and so they need to specialize in each of them. And third, the need to look for partnership and to create clusterization to get these benefits, full benefits. And then we have the second circuit, which is the government. And governments, they have the obligation to foster the development for the whole population. They have to act and produce determinant context for competitiveness beyond what each company is doing. And of course, they have to favor and facilitate strategies for that clusterization in a permanent, long-term manner to create an innovative rooms for clusterization. So to go ahead with any of these elements, let us to wonder about the contents for a trip of this sort. I would like to reinforce some ideas. First, this is not improvised. This is not coming from heaven. Nobody thinking of us and what is going to be our future and what's our decision. We need to take ownership of our future, as I said before. And this is not only aligned with speeches waiting for something will happen or other ones will do something. We have the need to redefine, to revisit the strategic framework which will enable us to guide new policies, new instruments, new areas and objectives. And so in these aspirational areas that we would like to develop in our respective countries. And of course, we need to take on the costs, which is very high cost in terms of reform and modernize public administrations as international agencies, as any institutional level, at every level in the different countries to adequate them to the different challenges, needs, and objectives that we have for this double endogenous and local development. And we need also to navigate these new frontiers and factors. To do all this, we have a number of keys for success and purposes. What we are needing, I mean, there's no magic recipes here. We need many things. We cannot copy a policy or a strategy because that could be subject to be copied. That wouldn't be a strategic, but you have to adapt them and to define them and to adapt it to your own strengths, to your reality, objectives, countries, and from there redefine the role that you would like to play. And for these are not recipes and not guidance, but we need to have a vision. We need to have an aspiration. We need to dream. What do we want to go and which is the desirable scenario? Jose Manuel mentioned the last publication that I prepared during the last months of the pandemic, which is the world of the Basque Country for 2050. Many friends told me that, I mean, in 2050, no one will ask for explanations. You are not going to be here. Nobody will know if you have done this right or not. And I said, well, you haven't read this entirely because I'm not making scenarios analysis. What I'm doing is that I defined a scenario. And so if you wonder what would be the scenario for the Basque Country, which is desirable for the people in the 2050, well, the people who are living in that time, they should be pleased and satisfied. And the companies which are developing some activities in the Basque Country, they should understand that they have advantages for being there, doing something, no matter the size of the activity or the presence. But that, to have that, we need that in the few years ahead, up until reaching 2050, what we have to do is a lot of tasks. In that book, there are only 100 important tasks to accomplish by each one, as long as we accomplish them, someone would say, "Well, I feel very comfortable in the society." And there has been a response to the challenges that I had ahead, and it has created this new situation, a condition for me. What will happen in the 2050? I don't know. 2030, probably we have improved substantially because of the work of everyone, not only thinking on new generations, but the commitment of the ones who are not going to be here probably, but the ones who have the possibility to continue working and doing things to improve our own situation in our own country. And finally, I'm going to close with a final message. Clusterize? Yes. Now, we have to clusterize a productive economy, a productive, competitive, prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable economy. It's not only to try to do it or to consider this or saying that this is worth thinking of, but to know that this is not only possible, but essentially. And to do this, I insist on this concept again, that we need to take ownership of our own future. And this requires a commitment of all stakeholders. This is not end trip. It is essential that the ones who have the responsibility and the commitment to launch initiatives and to lead strategies looking for a transformation process need to have very clear the purpose and the benefit for the society. And third, that you know that you are doing that seriously, you won't have the possibility to cut the ribbon. Other ones will do it many years later, in another moment, in a new situation, because all these processes never end. You will always have new social demands, you will always have new challenges and new responses, a new world that we are going to be living in. But we have to navigate these new factors, frontiers, and we have to have a strategy. So this long space that we all have, so welfare, prosperity, and competitiveness, and social and sustainable development is there, but it's especially attentive to manage transitions. We can all save the planet. We will always want to have the maximum welfare state, but the final aim requires transition processes, the magic of the processes that finally leaves no one behind and not destroying what we have now. And so, the last simple message that in this venue sounds very importantly with the work that you are doing. No more lost decades. No more lost decades. And that implies to fight and overcome the gaps which are hampering our growth, our inclusive development. No one has said that this is easy. No one has said that there are no costs, but we need to dream, we need to have aspiration, we need to inspire the people to go through the extraordinary trip. Let's transform problems into solutions, sources of actions, and try to see the world in terms of the enormous existing abundance to share and co-create the value that this has among all of us, instead of thinking of scarcity or of inequality in distribution and benefit. That's it. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor Jon Azúa, por su
Thank you,
conferencia.
Mr. Jon Azúa, for your
Continuación, como habíamos
lecture.
adelantado,
And as we have
nuestro
said,
conferencista responderá a las preguntas de la sala
he
y
will
de
answer
asistentes en
questions from
línea.
the room
Entonces,
and also
le
from
recordamos que
people who
puede
are online.
escanear el
So you
código
can
QR
scan this QR
y
code
enviar su pregunta al
and
Pleno,
send
que
your
antes pongan su
question.
nombre y luego la
Please write your
pregunta.
name and then the
También,
question.
si hubiera, podemos, secretario ejecutivo, bajo su
And
moderación, tomar
the
algunas preguntas de
executive
la sala.
secretary will moderate this part of the Q&A session. Thank you so much, John, for this conference. This conference has given us, I mean, a very high vision, 30,000 feet high, of all your detailed experience of what you have led and you have seen in many countries. I would like to start by my first question and reiterate, Jimena, well, we have this system. If you want to send the questions, I'm going to read them here, but also I think that we have microphone available in the room if someone of the attendees would like to ask a question here and not, loudly and not through this new technology. My question is the following. There's no doubt that the autonomous community of Basque Country during the 80s was facing very serious problems. Spain wasn't member of the European Union yet, and Spain had a lot of difficulties. You were facing terrorism, unemployment about 30%, made industry, shipyards, and others were restructuring, and we're not so competitive. And so this meant a enormous cultural change. We have heard here about clusterization, but how was this occurred? I mean, especially the shared commitment, because the message in Latin America, we know that we need to dream. We have a lot of dreamers here, and we need a lot of vision. We have a lot of visionaries, but the thing is not to be short of dreams or visions. It's that we are short of how can we translate dreams and visions into a reality. And there we have clusters, and how can we get the shared commitment of society? Because if we have one dreamer or a visionary, the thing is how the society dreams and how the society works collectively. Because this clusters concept, clusterization can be very transformative, and it was indeed in the Basque Country. And there's a key term that you use in your presentations, and we read in your book as well, why you have written that the magic of the process is what counts. What is a magic process? What, because, there we can find the answer to the house. And why was that so key in the productive transformation of the Basque Country? I'm asking probably some question for a separate conference, but that's my question by now.
Indeed,
la colaboración y el proceso
the
para
collaboration and the process to share a strategy and a commitment is not automatic, nor is it easy, nor will it happen just because. You have to work on it. This is why I speak about the magic of the process. As you have said, lots of people may understand clearly what needs to be done, what they are doing. They can have visualized their world and their future and more, but this requires processes, and no one can solve these topics alone. So to institutionalize a process Well, it's very complicated. The Basque country is small. We are a comma in Europe. But at the same time, we have an institutional model, which is a confederate model. For some, this means complicating things, but I think it's one of the good things we have because it makes easier the solution of the problems, and it forces us to share strategies. The government cannot say, I do this or that, even if you believe you have the strategy, but you have to come to agreements because there are parts that are not in your hands, and not only at the municipal, intermediate levels, etc. So all of that, well, we lived in a very critical situation, and I would say that with a double sensation. We had the feeling that we had lost the future. We were a peripheral region in Europe. We weren't part of the axis through which the future of the Economic Commission was being built. Spain was not a part of it either. We had an ambition, we had a dream to believe that this future Europe, whether we liked it or not completely, was our focus and our salvation point, guarantee of human rights, of freedom, of welfare, possibility of prosperity for our people. We started from a very harsh reality, which has been the dictatorship, autarky. We had an enormous and terrible terrorism. The foreign investment was zero. We had negative growth or degrowth. All the companies were falling down like a domino. All the big industry that had been the basis of the culture and the development of the Basque country historically, and that had placed it above any other region of the Spanish state, had to be transformed completely. The entrepreneurs would come to the government, in words of a vice president of those days, and they come to see us and they give us the keys of the company because they are not capable of paying taxes, and they would say, I'm not in a position to face a unionized world. I don't know. We have the revolutionary taxes, we have the threats, and an incapacity to go abroad to gain a space in the market, as you have said, with unemployment rates above 27, 28%, in some areas of the country, 28%. And the shipyards, steel plants, metal mechanic plants, electrical capital goods, fishery, even or agriculture. Before joining Europe, it looked like Europe could be that big source of future, but at the same time, it was going to be a very difficult element that would require from us adaptation, transformation, reconversion. So when the companies came individually to look for a solution, and with the scarcity of resources from the government, what you would say is, let us see. I can do an effort to help in this or that line with new policies or what have you, but I cannot take care of each of the companies. You have to make associations, restructurings, etc. You need a common element. And thinking about a country strategy, but we didn't like the strategies that were in fashion then, more geared towards regional aspects. Amongst other things, I was lucky enough to meet Michael Porter in Harvard. When I visited him as a professor of entrepreneurial strategy, I was not yet working in what was the competitive advantage of the nations afterwards. And he was not interested at all. He offered to collaborate with the Basque government. Whatever he knew about the Basque country was horrible. It would have been better for him to know nothing about the Basque country, but there was no way he didn't want to work on that. And he tells me that he's researching something that became the competitive advantage of the nations. And that captivated me, that possibility of using a cluster-like instrument, breaking those sectors that we thought should be broken, look for that relationship that I call coopetitive, to try to look for collaboration. And based on roots, the Basque country historically has had not only cooperativism, social economy, community development, etc., but we have this association spirit, but in the world of the enterprises, it's not that easy. In the Basque country, there's a very strong individual corporate leadership. The entrepreneur who has built his company, has gone through many things, is convinced about his own strategy and about his own role. So it's very difficult for him to accept that the neighbor from the same village, from the same street, has a strategy that is better than his own. And everybody aspires, well, we live many cases like this, to sit down to see if they can come to an agreement, and one tells to the other, look, we're going to sign this agreement, but I want you to know that my aspiration is to have the majority part of the share of this company. And the other one says, well, you have to know that my aspiration is the same, to have the majority share. So the magic of the process is that you can imagine when you have government responsibility and I start inviting entrepreneurs, different people to speak about promoting clusters and a cooperative scheme, people say this is craziness, this is too American, this is a matter of consultants, we're not going to do this. And it was very difficult, and we had to go block by block, we had to gain the trust because of the very bad situation that existed then. When we invited someone to speak about, to think about clusterization, first we had to make them understand which were the competitiveness advantages they would have. What kept them apart from Japan? Because yes, then the entrepreneurs would say, look, I know what I need. I need to fire people for free. I need your subventions for the interest rate, and I need a devaluation of the peseta. And you would say, look, in the first place, none of the three things is in my hands, and I don't believe in them. But in the second place, I will prove to you that even if I were able to do what you're saying, the gap that separates you from competing with the Japanese machinery is that you have no electronics, is that you are in a different market, is that you have a lack of design, is that you can sell and you are the seventh producer in the world and you represent 80% of tools manufacturing in Spain, but you are at a scale that means that you need to grow. So everybody had to learn. I was not a genius. I didn't know what each company had to do. Far from that, but governments can invite. When you go transparently with information and when they trust you and believe in you, what you are trying is not to sell your product, but you are trying to build something with them. And that magic of the process is because you go into a learning process where the learning process improves you. As people begin collaborating and working with others, when the government comes closer and understands the problems of the enterprises, well, that's a big advantage. We develop clusters that have never existed before and no one would have dreamt of them, like going into aeronautics and manufacturing planes that was for 5 countries, but the rules of the game were broken at a point in time. We understood what some could do and we could make that leap, and we could bet. When you bet for a nucleus which was productive manufacturing, well, then you move the whole budget and the finances, then you develop infrastructure, you mobilize technological centers towards certain technologies, you develop programs that respond to what people really need. And the little we knew in that country was that we had an industrial culture, we had a manufacturing culture that needed to change. We had shipyards that needed to be closed. Today, we can lead manufacturing process of platforms, oil rigs, renewable energy platforms in the most complicated seas of the world. We had a vehicle industry that was very powerful, but part of those manufacturings and products, we could work with other materials and we could apply that to aeronautics. We had machinery that needed electronics, but there was a big knowledge and there was a big capacity to understand. The industry was capable of doing that, and we clusterized everything. This is why we could move towards projects like a museum. We never thought of a museum. Clusterizing art, culture, territory to transform a whole urban region and to develop different elements. But all that was possible, and recovering the self-esteem, all that was possible to the extent that people realized that they were capable of doing first-level things, that they were capable of overcoming the difficulties, recovering self-esteem, thinking that you do have a future, that you're not going to be the world leader of AI and software, but all that you will have to manufacture to apply AI in the world, well, someone needs to know about industry, needs to be rigorous in their production. That's our aspiration, to be co-leaders regarding some things in the world. And that is a little dream that becomes a magic, the magic of the process. And then you disappear, you do not continue, the same teams are not there, but others have come, and other teams will come. And if you want to dismantle something, a new team comes in and says, now it's the time to work with clusters. And they find that, yes, in clusters, more than 4,000 people were working.
Because of the institutions and companies, they are working in collaboration projects, and we are working in a process that we are now working for hours in this process. U.S. government, you can change a policy and you can put anything, but democratically not. So if you have a project that is better than the one that you have now, so when you come, we will change it. In the meantime, we will continue with this one. So the magic of the process will improve this gradually. Thank you, John. I think that this is essential for something that is a problem in Latin America, the lack of continuity among the different governments, to have institutionality and not the public institution as we think of them traditionally, but cluster institutionality. In other words, which are clusters of cooperation, powerful cooperation environment, where there are a lot of actors, university, academic, technical institutes, the public-private sector, and what you have said, this warranties continuity. We have a lot of questions. I'm going to ask 3 questions and because they are related. And I will invite you, well, John told me yesterday that the wings of Embraer aircraft are manufactured in the Basque country. And so this is a consequence of clusterization. But our colleague Nicolo Gligo is saying, how can we start? If I'm appointed as director of clusterization in a country, what do I have to do in day 1, day 2, day 3? An interesting question. Ricardo Monge from Costa Rica is asking, or saying the main deficiency of cluster Latin America and the Caribbean is the lack of public-private coordination. What recommendations could you give us to improve this coordination? And Ricardo is asking also, what are the features of the leading institute of a cluster program in any country of Latin America and the Caribbean?
Vuelvo a lo que he comentado, que no hay recetas mágicas.
As I said before, there are no magic recipes. What to do day 1? If you are going to be director of clusterization, I will say that day 0, you study and you read a lot about cluster. What is to clusterize the economy? What is to localize? What's importance of this topic and how certain organizations work? So day 1, what you have to do, or one of the recommendations rather, is to make the diamond analysis. That is to see what are all the factors that you have in your own territory. What do you have and what you don't? Such as the traffic light methods, each of the conditions, factors, the activities of the industries, infrastructure, services, the role of the government on some areas. And this is to wonder, what do I have as potential capacity to do what I want to do? You have that right in green color, then what do I have to work for this? And in red, what I do not have. And so then, is it possible to bring this over here or to connect with that? These are the first questions. You have to analyze the natural clusters which are not organized, but you know that in some areas there is a high concentration of companies which devote to, I don't know, steel activities, metal mechanic activities, and then I have now art galleries, what can I do with these? And then to call them upon, trying to organize them, to think of identifying, to also bring about some personalities in the country which can provide a warranty to be credible as leaders. They have a reputation. And so to attract them, saying, I'm just asking you to help me in the, in promoting this, and you are not going to be the chair of this, but I want you to let this very clear that the agents will be the ones who will be working on this. And I think that from there, you're going to have people who will reject this cluster, you are going to have an important confrontation with Chamber of Commerce, some organizations. They will tell you that they are not interested, or you will have to look for the way to find a way how can you get them to clusterization so they can the members finally identify that organization is attracting the other ones, and that they will tell you what new members or what are the activities that you have to incorporate to have a full cluster. Public-private cooperation, I think that is more complicated. I mean, the public-private than public-private-public. Why? Because public sector is very varied. They have all legitimate value at institutional department level, and they are used to function in activities in silos, and you have to make an enormous effort to convince them and to identify what are the benefits that each of them can contribute with to be part of this association. And this is a work that requires a lot of effort. What is important, I think, that to create an umbrella is, as we did in the Basque Country, the umbrella of clusterization with the competitivity. That was a program that came from vice presidents of the government with the participation of the different governors, deputy, general representatives of the 3 territories, and council with the main ministers of the areas involved in competitiveness. And from there, this enable us to not to have a cluster, but to function very well and to put some education mechanisms available to the ones who would like to participate in clusters, for the responsibles of the technical centers, whether public or private, for the universities, for people to understand what is a cluster, what is to clusterize, and to have this map that you need as a country and to foster a strategy. And this is not a process of today's. It's not to give a speech that everyone will adhere to you, but this is, implies effort, a lot of work in some cases. Probably you have to compel them to participate. And, well, you need something for reconversion to restructure a company, and this other one also are all on the same line. I'm going to help you, but indirectly through a collaborative participation. So you have to develop that to approach a common process. And all this is something that is not in a manual. It's not a guideline, but you have to make progress. Some people will collaborate more, some other less. It's not a linear process. You are promoting one cluster that everyone is enthusiastic about that cluster of paper, and then you find that the most important paper company is going to bankruptcy, and there's no other way but to provide funds from the governments, and all the small ones, the small paper company entrepreneurs, they are bored about this, and they abandon the cluster because the government has just assisted the big one. So you have to, over time, you are going to be more strengthened after time, and these are the things that may happen, and not all your attempts will be successful. And as part of the competitive programs, we have 25 official clusters, association coordinated, by a unit, a service, provided support to clusterization, support to management, etc. So all this is an endless process, what I mentioned in my talk as well.
Muchísimas gracias. Tenemos otras.
We have other questions which are related, but you can give us example. Marcos Ginas, our colleague, said, how could you inspire the different actors to go along the strategy? What are the arrangements that you implemented to coordinate the different actors? Is there any experience how female employment has been fostering the initial structure to involve everyone was very fragile. I mean, the people that we connected, but above all, something very important. If you call upon people so they can trust in a competitiveness strategy based on clusters, and you want them to participate in the same, you have to take this very seriously. And you have to attend all the meetings. You cannot call the companies if you are not attending. You have to for them to trust and see, and what you believe and see, they have to reflect that feeling on you. So this is something that you have to make them to understand what the company or the sector is demanding. You have to go ahead. Then you have to learn, to study, to talk to the people and try to see the benefits and try to talk to all the key stakeholders to explain them and to call more people to join this. And these are many hours, a lot of preparation, a lot of work, a lot of support, new people who are joining. And then we have to look in each cluster, we need to identify very quickly some line of action, some project, some key project that is transformative in this. So to convince people that there are possibilities to develop a cluster in the aeronautics, for instance, is with an ambitious project such as the one we have, the Embraer crisis. Embraer has always manufactured the aircrafts entirely, and then suddenly they faced a crisis and they went to what they called the shared risk. And some Vasquez entrepreneurs, which were not part of the aeronautic industry, they were in other industries, but they were selling in the composite elements to Embraer, and they knew the project that was there, and they said, this is a great opportunity. And so they came and they tell us about the project, and so an immediate decision had to be made by the government, and what is going to be manufactured? The wings of the MB1. There is 1 year to manufacture the wings. And how easy is to manufacture wings? Oh no, this is very difficult, a lot of technology, etc. And where are we going to manufacture them? The country is a manufacturer. There are people who do everything. They are not manufacturing wings, but they do different things. And in this moment, in the world, we have a number of aeronautic engineers which are involved in many projects. We can bring 200 engineers from Israel, Russia, United States. There's no problem with that. We're going to do this. We are going to set up a factory. We need to find some place. And what's the problem to do all this? Well, to do this, we need that the project has financial cost equivalent to zero.
And then if someone comes and says that, when you have not had previous training and you have failed in a similar project, well, they go away, they walk away. But in the country, we had tried to do something similar, much bigger with the McDonnell Douglas when we were going to build the MT-12 that hasn't been built so far. So we learned that it was the moment when the rules of the games changed in the aeronautic world, and the big manufacturers needed partners to do things. We understood what that meant. We understood what could be done, the technological capacities we had in the country, the capacities to collaborate, clusterizing the work of many, and be able to work in this project and in that public collaboration to be able to build a design with the responsible persons from the Ministry of Finance, so that the government, the Basque government, assumed the possibility that the first 400 wings produced and sold weren't going to allow you to recover the taxes that you were facilitating for the construction of those wings. But as of wing 401, you would start recovering, and that risk of assuming the cost and all what it involved until wing 400, that was what enabled to mobilize a whole cluster that afterwards, of course, was very successful. The company moved on, and it's a cluster that has a portfolio of about $75 billion. But it has been built as time has gone by based on companies, new situations. But if that step hadn't been taken, there wouldn't have been a project. There are other projects that are much simpler. Vehicles and cars. The first thing was a rationalization plan of the production and process and training to all the companies that were building parts of cars, and at the same time an extraordinary effort to attract with fiscal support to attract a first manufacturer, which was Mercedes-Benz, that came to the Basque Country, and they have been there for about 20 and some years, building a very specific car. And there is an enhancement of the factory to build a new type of vehicle. For all these things, you need some elements, you need some tractor projects that will give a meaning to each cluster or each organization. Each one is very unique. Some are smaller, but they work, and it is the cluster itself that has its own demands. Very interesting. Here, there's a way of thinking. This issue of clusterization is a way through which to see the world and through which to see the opportunities. This is the last question, even though we have many, because it's a very important topic in itself, from Ruth Suarez, and I will add a little bit to it. And Ruth asks, did you have subsidized capital in the experience of the clusters of the Basque Country, or was it money that came from association? So I would like to ask you also, especially now that we see that there is a new industrial policy, especially in the United States and in Europe, where subsidies come in the forefront, billions of dollars for consumers and companies, subsidies in many ways. We say, and I think we are closer to that in ECLAC, we say that what we propose puts governance in the first place. All these things that you've been speaking about, clusters as a collaboration method, multiple interactions, public-private, public-public collaboration, and of course, behind that, we have financing. But if you could talk a little bit more about subsidies, were there subsidies? Was there infrastructure support? How did the finances work? The more governance you have in the forefront, investments are investments, and there's an element of incentives. There are some incentives that are not subsidies to the IRA of the United States. But if you could tell us a little bit more about that. The clusterization policy is one of the cheapest industrial promotion policies. The direct allocation to the process of clusterization, the organization, the governance is minimum. It is to help and to pay the payroll of the manager of each of the organizations that are evaluated. It's not something crazy. And there is a unit, there's a society of promotion, reindustrialization, etc., innovation of the country that coordinates their programs, that meets with them, evaluates them, etc. Once a certain cluster has been determined or constituted, these innovations are channeled based on the different topics. For instance, clusters are the consultant element of the government for identifying the technologies that need to be incorporated in the government's plan of innovation and technology, because that is what the companies are living. We have the technological center, the universities, the innovation centers, and then it is a project that receives a certain amount depending on the type of project and the infrastructure. In some cases, the government participates in the construction or financing of some of the infrastructures. For instance, if you have a cluster of automobiles, at a point in time, the construction of AAIC, Automotive Intelligence Center, was built. And there you have the participation of all the companies related to the world of automobiles to form that center and research in concrete facilities. And then we have fiscal support to clusters to be able to work on a project like this. Who recovers? The government that participates, but afterwards recovers. And the base company that manufactured the wings of Embraer, after some time, went to the stock exchange. And when it went to the stock exchange, the government recovers part of that value for other investment. So this is a dynamic process, and there are counterparts. When you give someone support of this kind, you ask for a commitment, for instance, of suppliers for this or that. So it's a dynamic mechanism. When we started the program, the work we asked from Porter was done from the stock exchange of Bilbao. That is, it was the cost that first work had, the competitive advantage of the Basque country was financed by the stock exchange, plus the Basque government. So we have a number of initiatives and projects that are financed by the companies themselves, and there are others where the government participates. And it is true that historically speaking, from the Basque government, lots and important budgets have been devoted to the industry. The industry portfolio has always had important amounts. to finance interest rates for infrastructure, to help restructuring of the industry, for the social expenditures associated to that social policy, which is a must for a certain restructuring. And all of these are dynamic projects that are included in a certain policy, in a general framework approved by the parliament for a certain period of time.
Hay algunos programas que son subsidiados, o sea,
There
que
are some
consideran que es un bien
programs
público
that are
y de alguna manera
subsidized.
hay unos fondos
It's a
allí,
public, they are
no sé,
considered
bueno,
to be a
investigación y
public
desarrollo, me
good.
imagino que
There are
mucho de eso es
funds
bien
for
público.
research R&D.
La financiación de los centros
The
tecnológicos
financing of the technological centers has
Una-
three
una
legs.
cantidad es lo que se llama
One
fondos,
amount is what we
no
call
competitivos, que
non-competitive
se entiende
funds.
que es una cantidad que se da
It is an
a
amount that
soportar
is
la
given to
investigación básica y el
support
desarrollo de
basic
tecnologías
research
comerciales en una etapa todavía no comercializable,
in
para que
an,
puedan, porque entiendes que forman parte
because
del
you
plan de
understand that this
tecnología
is
de
part
país
of the
y son el tipo de
science plan of the
investigación,
country, and it
ciencia,
is a
luego
kind of
tecnología que
science or
tienes que desarrollar.
technology that you need
La
to
segunda
develop.
pata es
The
fondos
second leg
competitivos en el que
is
los centros
competitive funds,
tecnológicos
where the technological
tienen que
centers
presentar
have to
proyectos
present
siempre vinculados a
projects
empresas
always related to
para
companies
poder aspirar
in
a una
order
determinada
to be able
beca
to
para
receive
compartir
public
esa
help
actividad. Y una tercera parte
to
que es
support them in their
propio
activities. And then
tecnológico,
a
que
third
sus
leg,
miembros
which is the
encuentran más
technological center
sostenible,
itself,
Santiago de Mana, por ejemplo. Una de
which
las características de los centros tecnológicos vascos
works on these
es
things.
que
One
son,
of the
con gran
characteristics of the
diferencia,
Basque
los centros
research
tecnológicos
center or
que más
technological
fondos
centers
europeos
are
captan,
the ones that obtain
porque
more
participan
European
en
funds
proyectos europeos,
because
no
they
porque
participate in
han
European
tocado y se llevan ese
projects.
porcentaje, ¿no? Entonces, todo esto es una cadena de
So this is
actuaciones
a chain
importantes. Y luego, pues,
that
hay
is very
algunas
important.
ayudas que son para
And
incentivar
then
algo,
there is some
que serían,
support
pues, como
to
existen
incentivize
las
something,
labores de promoción,
like
cambian, por ejemplo, promoción
everywhere
para
there's promotion for
ayudas de todo tipo
entrepreneurship,
para
support of all sorts,
empresas, dar tutela, lo que sea, sino aportar una cantidad muy
to
pequeña, por cierto,
contribute with a
para
small
cada uno de
amount
los
for each
proyectos
one of the
emprendimiento, startups,
entrepreneurial startups. So that's the mechanism that we have. It is very rich in initiatives, in promotion, and very changing.
pero son cambiantes, cambiantes quiero decir, en el pequeño matiz, en el tipo de proyecto.
There are different types of projects, different rewards for the different types, and according to the priorities of each moment. Well, it's 1 o'clock, so I think we can close the meeting. I would like to make a brief reflection here as motto. The 75th motto was working for a more productive, sustainable, and inclusive projects. This is the dream of ECLAC, of many Latin Americans and Caribbeans and many citizens in the whole region. Inclusiveness includes many things: non-discrimination, inclusive work, dynamic work markets. Productivity includes everything that we've been discussing, and sustainable development, the green growth, reduction of contamination, cleanliness of the rivers, friendship with nature, appreciation of our forests, of biodiversity. That's our dream. This conversation has made it very clear that these things don't come separated, and an inclusive growth for a dynamic market, a labor market, and a green transformation. Everything needs investment, transformation, and needs an approach of clustering, of clusterization. So the philosophy is how to implement our dreams and our vision, to put them into practice. And I go to that excellent question. If one of us becomes chief of the cluster policy of a country, What do we do day 1, 2, 3? Day 0, learn about clusters. Learn about clusters, read. Because otherwise, well, it's very easy to speak about clusters, an Anglo-Saxon idea, read about it. And this related with a topic that we are very much used to other kinds of discussions in Latin America. We have a tradition of inflation, of stabilization, macro.
Y tenemos muchos expertos, aunque no sean economistas, ¿no? En política fiscal.
We have fiscal policy, monetary policy, because this is a topic we have here. And we speak a lot about health, about education. But this conversation that we have had today, we do not speak very much about what we have spoken today, John. And that's our crusade. Now that we launched this for productive policies, we have to do an effort to install this type of discussion.
How can we manage this big transformation for a more productive and sustainable development? And to understand the clusters, how can we get collaboration, all what we have been talking about in this conference, and certainly Basque Country is a case of success, and you played a key role on that. And so this is the great meaning of this conference that we have had today, of this conversation, that we would like to continue discussing this. It's not only what we want, but we are convinced that unless that we do not expand this, we are not going to be able to make the transformations. I don't know if you would like to say a final words. In line with what you have said, yes, an important reflection is, this is not new in Latin America. In Latin America, we have a lot of people who have been working in clusterization for years, in training, the programs for competitiveness, and a lot of work about clustering. What is the mapping of in different countries, the network I'm part of, the competitiveness, Harvard, Michael Porter. There are many universities in Latin America which are working on clustering for many years by now. They train people, they have researchers who are publishing many papers. And what I think that what we're missing is because there is an important theoretical reflection of a high level, but what we are missing is to implement this, to put this into practice, to put all these initiatives into practice, and to take ownership of this, and not to be putting this as decoration. Today, I'm going to have this cluster or this organization, and everything scattered. I think that a real strategy of clusterization is essential, and this is something that I think different governments can make. Could be a company as well, which inspires and promotes clusters to approach macro projects. But what is normal, what is more simpler, is that a government promotes a regional development based on clusterized economies. And I would like to encourage you and this is one of the things that we learned on the Basque case, is that we can make a big transformation, and in not many years. You can need 30, 40 years, but you can do that now. The possibility of eliminating these lost decades, and we can see results. And that's very important to go ahead with transformation. And thank you so much for being here. I hope that the word I have presented is of use to each one of you. Thank you so much, Jon. A very good final remark to keep the illusion to continue contributing and that this won't take so long. And so, of course, Latin America has had any type of productive and industrial development. We have great experiences. In December, we launched a portal of clusters initiatives and other initiatives or territorial productive initiatives, an inventory of more than 300 cases over different countries, 9, 10 countries that we have by now. The idea is that this is not only an inventory, but a live portal with training, webinars, and the network of people who are participated in this. You know that the Basque country, you have 4,000 people who participated in some way, people who are working in the government and the companies. So this is a critical mass of people devoted to these topics. So we're working on that. On that, I would like to ask for a big round of applause.
Muchas gracias, secretario ejecutivo.
Thank
señor,
you,
Jon Azúa.
Mr. Jon Azúa, Executive Secretary. In this way, we are finishing with the 18th Raúl Prebisch Lecture in ECLAC. The ones who are online, thank you very much for being connected. And for the ones who are here, we invite you to share a cocktail outside the room.